Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time. Not to the grand temples or the epic battles you usually hear about, but to a far more unsettling side of ancient Greece, the horrifying diseases that silently stalked its citizens. Imagine a world buzzing with philosophical debate and athletic prowess, yet utterly vulnerable to an unseen enemy that could strike down anyone, anytime. This isn't just history, it's a stark, chilling reminder that even in the birthplace of Western civilization, life could be brutally short and undeniably miserable. You, dear listener, would probably not have survived a year. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the bustling heart of Athens, a citizen in the prime of its golden age. The year is, let's say, 450 BCE. The air hums with intellectual discourse. The scent of olive oil and freshly baked bread mingles with the faint aroma of the sea. You walk past the majestic Parthenon, still under construction, its marble gleaming in the Attic sun. Life here feels vibrant, sophisticated, a pinnacle of human achievement. You pride yourself on your physical fitness, perhaps having trained at the gymnasium, ready for the next Olympic Games, or at least a lively debate in the agora. You wash your hands and face in water drawn from a communal fountain, perhaps even take a dip in the public baths, feeling a sense of cleanliness, a far cry from the medieval mud you might imagine. You think you're pretty healthy, pretty secure, but beneath this veneer of enlightenment, an invisible world teems with threats. You don't know about bacteria or viruses. Of course, the very concept of microscopic life is millennia away from discovery. Instead, you understand illness as a disruption of your body's four humors blood: yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. A fever, a cough, a sudden weakness, these are signs of an imbalance. Perhaps you've eaten too much rich food. Or perhaps a sudden chill has upset your inner harmony. The doctors, followers of Hippocrates, speak of observation and diagnosis, of understanding the body's natural processes. You admire their dedication, their attempts to bring reason to the chaos of disease. Yet, despite this burgeoning medical philosophy, common ailments are simply a part of daily life. You, like everyone else, probably suffer from parasites. You don't see them, but they're there, lurking in your gut. Drinking water, even from the public fountains, is not always clean. Contamination from human and animal waste is a constant, unseen threat. You've probably had worms, roundworms, tapeworms, pinworms, at some point, leading to chronic stomach discomfort, malnourishment, and general weakness. It's not seen as a disease, simply a fact of life. You learn to live with a perpetual low-level malaise, attributing it to bad luck or a poor constitution. The most common killer, especially among children, is dysentery. You've seen it firsthand. It starts with stomach cramps, then relentless, watery diarrhea, often mixed with blood. Dehydration quickly sets in, especially in the hot Greek sun. Young children, with their smaller bodies, succumb rapidly. You've probably lost a sibling or two, perhaps even your own child, to this merciless killer. It's a terrifying, swift decline. The doctors, with their theories of humors, offer little more than basic palliative care, perhaps some herbal concoctions to soothe the stomach, but nothing to stop the relentless fluid loss. The constant presence of human waste in and around city streets, combined with flies and contaminated water sources, ensures dysentery is never far away. It's a brutal, common reality. Beyond the gut, the skin is a canvas for various afflictions. Scabies, caused by tiny mites burrowing under your skin, leaves you with an unbearable, persistent itch. You scratch constantly, leaving red welts and sores that can easily become infected. Ringworm, a fungal infection, spreads in circular patterns across your skin, hair, and nails. These aren't life-threatening, but they are chronically uncomfortable, disfiguring, and often lead to secondary bacterial infections from constant scratching. Imagine trying to engage in philosophical debate with an unbearable itch on your scalp. not exactly conducive to deep thought. Then there are the fevers. Malaria, known then simply as fever and ague, is endemic in many parts of Greece, particularly in marshy regions. You know the drill cycles of intense chills, followed by a burning fever, drenching sweats, and then a period of exhaustion, only for it to return days later. It leaves you weak, anemic, and susceptible to other illnesses. The ancient Greeks might have blamed it on marsh miasma, bad air rising from swamps. A concept that sounds quaint to modern ears but was, in its own way, a partially accurate observation of the correlation between swamps and sickness. You might have friends or family members who suffer from chronic bouts of malaria, their lives marked by recurring weakness and fatigue. It's a debilitating, insidious presence. You might also encounter tuberculosis, though you wouldn't know it by that name. You'd simply see people slowly wasting away, coughing persistently, sometimes spitting blood. They would grow thin, pale, and weak, often succumbing after months or even years of decline. This is a disease that affects the lungs primarily, but can also attack bones and other organs, leading to deformities and chronic pain. The crowded conditions in cities, the close proximity in homes and public spaces, make it easy for the disease to spread. It's a long, drawn-out process, a slow death that casts a pall over many families. And then there are the less common, but utterly terrifying, diseases. Leprosy, though rare, is known and deeply feared. You might see individuals with disfigured faces and limbs, forced to live outside the city walls, ostracized and alone. The mere sight of them fills you with dread, a visceral understanding of contagion, even if the underlying cause is unknown. The social stigma attached to such visible chronic illnesses is immense, turning victims into pariahs. Childhood is a gauntlet of survival. Beyond dysentery, infants and young children are highly susceptible to measles, mumps, and rubella. Without vaccines, these childhood diseases, which seem mild to you today, are often deadly. A fever, a rash, swollen glands. These are not just minor discomforts, but potential death sentences for the very young. You witness the heartbreaking reality of high infant mortality rates, a silent grief that permeates every family. It's a stark contrast to modern societies, where such diseases are largely eradicated or easily managed. You just expect a certain percentage of children to die, and you accept it as fate. Even the most ordinary activities carry risks. A simple cut or scrape can quickly turn deadly due to infection. Without antibiotics, a bacterial infection can spread rapidly, leading to sepsis, what you might call blood poisoning, a swollen, painful limb, a high fever, chills, and then a rapid decline. You've seen it happen. A seemingly minor injury, if left untreated or improperly treated, could be a death sentence. The barber surgeon might try to clean the wound with wine or apply herbal poultices, but often it's a losing battle. The sheer number of everyday injuries, combined with the lack of sterile conditions, makes infection a constant, horrifying threat. Historians still debate the true prevalence and specific strains of many ancient diseases due to the limitations of historical records and diagnostic methods. However, the textual evidence, particularly from writers like Hippocrates and later Thucydides, paints a clear picture of a world where disease was a constant, terrifying companion. Your life in ancient Greece, for all its philosophical grandeur, is lived in a constant, unseen battle against microscopic enemies, a fight you are largely unprepared to win. The horrifying reality of ancient Greek diseases isn't just a footnote. It's the backdrop to every triumph, every debate, and every beautiful piece of art you experience. It's a brutal reminder that even in an age of enlightenment, life was often short, painful, and far from easy. You've just grappled with the common, horrifying diseases that silently plagued your ancient Greek life, the persistent discomforts, and the sudden, brutal killers. Now, as you live through this time, you begin to observe the prevailing beliefs about illness, why it happens, and the often strange and desperate measures people take to find a cure. In your understanding of the world, diseases aren't just random misfortunes. They are often seen as a direct result of divine intervention. You might have angered a god, perhaps neglected a sacrifice, or broken an oath. A sudden fever could be the wrath of Apollo, a skin rash, the curse of a minor deity you've offended. This belief system isn't just superstition, It's a way of trying to find meaning and order in a chaotic world. When someone falls ill, you might see their family flocking to a temple, offering prayers and sacrifices, hoping to appease the offended god and lift the curse. You might even go yourself, desperate for any glimmer of hope, convinced that your fate lies in the hands of the Olympians, beyond divine wrath. Another pervasive theory is the concept of miasmas. This is the idea that diseases are caused by bad air or corrupt vapors rising from decaying matter, stagnant water, or even crowded, unsanitary places. When a foul odor drifts through the marketplace, or you pass a putrid swamp, a shiver of fear runs down your spine. You instinctively hold your breath or cover your nose with a perfumed cloth, while the modern understanding of germs is entirely absent. This idea of miasma, though flawed, has a kernel of truth. Foul smells often accompany decaying matter and stagnant water, which do harbor disease-causing microbes. So, in a way, ancient Greeks were observing a correlation, even if they misinterpreted the causation. You might see people burning aromatic herbs, lighting fires, or even moving their homes to higher, even windier ground, hoping to escape the bad air. When you or someone you know falls ill, you turn to the healers of your time. The most prominent are the Hippocratic physicians. These are not priests, but rational observers who believe in natural causes for disease. They teach that the body is governed by the balance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness, to them, is an imbalance of these humors. A fever might mean too much blood, requiring a bleeding. A chill might be an excess of phlegm. Their treatments often involve diet, rest, exercise, and sometimes remedies to restore balance, emetics to induce vomiting, purgatives to encourage bowel movements, or bleeding to reduce excess blood. You see them examining urine, feeling pulses, and making detailed observations of symptoms, trying to apply logic to what often feels like chaos. Their approach, though lacking modern scientific tools, is a significant step towards rational medicine. However, Hippocratic medicine isn't your only option. You also have the Asclepia, temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. These aren't just places of worship, they are ancient healing centers, almost like spiritual hospitals. If you are desperately ill or suffering from a chronic ailment that the Hippocratic physicians cannot cure, you might make a pilgrimage to an Asclepion. Here, you would undergo rituals, purification baths, fasting, and most importantly, incubation. You would sleep in a sacred dormitory, hoping that Asclepius himself, or his sacred snakes which slither freely in the temples, would visit you in a dream and reveal the cure. You might wake up with a feeling of renewed health, or symbolic dream to interpret. Some of these temples also employed skilled physicians and offered treatments, but the primary focus was on divine intervention and the power of faith. It's a fascinating blend of spirituality and early medical practice. You witness both desperate hope and fervent belief in these sacred healing spaces. Surgery, as you know it, is rudimentary and terrifying. Without anesthesia or proper antiseptics, any invasive procedure is incredibly risky. Fractures are set, dislocations reduced, and wounds stitched. But deep infections are common and often fatal. You might see a doctor attempting to remove an arrowhead from a soldier or drain a large abscess. The patient's screams would echo through the streets. Amputations, a last resort, are gruesome and frequently lead to death from shock or infection. The instruments are simple knives, saws, drills, all unsterilized. The sheer pain and risk involved means surgery is almost always a last, desperate measure, one common, yet horrifying. Medical practice is cupping. You see practitioners applying heated cups to the skin, creating a vacuum that draws blood to the surface, or even breaking the skin to draw blood out. The belief is that this pulls out bad humors or diseases. While it might provide temporary relief for some muscular pains, it does nothing for internal diseases and carries a risk of infection. Similarly, bloodletting, or phlebotomy, is common. If you have a fever, a physician might make an incision in a vein or apply leeches, believing that removing excess blood will restore balance to the humors. You've probably seen someone undergoing this procedure. The basin filling with dark blood. A grim sight. Herbal remedies are omnipresent for almost every ailment. There's a plant or a concoction believed to offer relief. Opium, derived from poppies, is used for pain relief and to induce sleep, a powerful, if addictive, drug. Willow bark, containing compounds similar to aspirin, is used for fever and pain. Garlic is believed to ward off illness and strengthen the body. You learn from your elders which plants to gather for headaches, for stomach upset, or for treating minor wounds. This traditional knowledge, passed down through generations, forms the backbone of everyday self-care. It's practical, often effective for minor ailments, but utterly useless against the truly horrifying epidemic diseases. Despite the best efforts of physicians and priests, childhood remains a perilous journey. Infanticide, though not openly discussed, is not uncommon, especially for deformed or sickly newborns. You just accept that many children won't survive to adulthood. The emotional toll of constantly losing infants and young children is immense, but it is a grief that society has normalized. You see mothers who have buried multiple children, their faces etched with a quiet, enduring sorrow. This high infant mortality rate is a constant, horrifying backdrop to the everyday lives of families. The belief in curses and evil eyes also plays a role in explaining illness. If you suddenly fall ill after an argument with a neighbor, or if a misfortune befalls your family, you might suspect a malevolent spell or a jealous glance. Charms, amulets, and counterspells are used to protect against such unseen forces. You might wear a small, protective amulet around your neck, or hang one above your doorway, hoping to ward off evil and ill health. This blends seamlessly with the more rational medical approaches, as people grasp for any explanation, any form of control, in a world where so much is beyond their comprehension. You might hear whispers about the sacred disease, epilepsy, unlike other illnesses, which are often attributed to imbalance or divine wrath. Epilepsy, with its dramatic seizures, is thought to be a direct visitation from the gods, or a possession by spirits. Hippocratic physicians, notably, tried to demystify it, arguing it had natural causes, but the popular belief in its sacred origin persisted. You might see someone suffering a seizure in the agora, their body convulsing, foam at their mouth, and onlookers might react with a mixture of fear, awe, and perhaps even reverence. It's a truly disturbing sight, both medically terrifying and spiritually ambiguous. The lack of understanding about contagion is a major barrier to preventing spread. You might avoid someone who is visibly ill, but you don't understand how disease can be carried by someone who appears healthy, or by tiny insects like mosquitoes carrying malaria or fleas. The idea of isolating the sick is sometimes practiced, but without a scientific basis, it's often too little, too late, or applied inconsistently. The concept of germ theory, that tiny invisible creatures cause disease, is millennia away. This blind spot is why diseases like dysentery, fevers, and eventually the Great Plagues can sweep through populations with such devastating speed. In the end, while the ancient Greeks made remarkable strides in philosophical and rational thought, their understanding of disease remained rudimentary. You live in a world where sickness is a constant, terrifying companion, explained by a complex tapestry of divine will, environmental factors, and humoral imbalances. You try remedies both rational and spiritual, hoping against hope that you can ward off the unseen forces that constantly threaten your very existence. It's a brutal, uncertain dance with mortality, played out every single day. You've absorbed the common beliefs and the often futile attempts at healing in ancient Greece. Now, as you continue your life in this vibrant yet vulnerable society, you're confronted with the direct and harrowing consequences of poor sanitation and crowded living conditions. It's the silent, constant incubator for the terrifying diseases you've just learned about. Imagine stepping out of your modest home in Athens. The streets are narrow, unpaved, and bustling. But look closely at the ground. You'll see a mix of things: discarded food scraps, animal droppings, and, quite frequently, human waste. There are no sophisticated sewage systems as you know them in your modern world. While public latrines exist in some areas, and wealthy homes might have rudimentary drainage, for the vast majority of citizens, human waste is often collected in pots and then simply dumped into the streets or into communal pits outside the city. Rain might wash some of it away, but often it simply accumulates, attracting flies and creating a perpetual breeding ground for disease. The smell, a constant, low-level assault on your senses, is simply a fact of life you've learned to ignore. The water you drink, drawn from public fountains or wells, is constantly at risk of contamination. These sources, vital for survival, are often located near areas where waste is disposed of, or where people and animals congregate. Every time you draw water, you're essentially playing a game of chance. A single sick person's waste, even in minute quantities, can contaminate an entire water source, spreading dysentery, typhoid, or other horrifying diarrheal diseases like wildfire. You don't understand the concept of germs in the water, of course, but you know that sometimes, after drinking from a particular fountain, illness seems to follow. Historians still debate the precise contribution of contaminated water versus direct contact in the spread of specific ancient epidemics. But the role of water as a vector is undeniable. Your living conditions contribute significantly to the problem. Homes are often small and tightly packed, especially within the city walls. Multiple family members, sometimes extended family, live and sleep in close quarters. This proximity is ideal for the spread of respiratory illnesses like colds, influenza, though you wouldn't identify it as such, and, more horrifyingly, tuberculosis. If one person in your household develops a persistent cough, the chances are high that others will soon follow. The air in your home, especially during colder months when windows are shut and fires burn, can be thick with smoke and airborne particles from illness. You cough often, and so does everyone around you. It's just a normal part of existence. Consider the public spaces you frequent. The agora, the bustling marketplace, is a hub of activity. People gather closely to haggle over goods, to listen to speeches, to socialize. Athletes train in crowded gymnasiums, their bodies sweating in close contact. The public baths, while intended for cleanliness, are communal pools of water where diseases can easily be exchanged. The very fabric of your social life, built around gathering in close proximity, inadvertently becomes a mechanism for disease transmission. You see people coughing, sneezing, perhaps even openly vomiting in public spaces. And while it might be unpleasant, there's no understanding of how these actions contribute to widespread illness. The absence of systematic waste management extends beyond human waste. Animal carcasses, food waste, and general refuse are often simply thrown into the streets or onto open piles. This creates a magnet for vermin, rats, mice, and insects. While you're annoyed by the rats scurrying in the alleyways or the flies buzzing around your food, you don't connect them to the horrifying fevers and illnesses that sweep through the population. You don't know that these creatures can carry diseases like bubonic plague, which devastated Athens in the Peloponnesian War, but was not fully understood then as plague, or that mosquitoes breeding in stagnant water are vectors for malaria, making those cycles of fever and chills a constant threat, especially during warmer months. Even your diet, while seemingly fresh, can be a source of constant low-level sickness. Food preservation methods are rudimentary. Meat and fish spoil quickly in the Mediterranean heat. You often eat grains, olives, and wine, which are more stable, but any fresh produce or meat, if handled improperly or left too long, can cause digestive upsets and more severe food poisoning. There are no refrigeration or strict food safety standards. You learn to cook food thoroughly, especially meat, but you still experience bouts of stomach cramps and nausea, which you attribute to bad food rather than specific pathogens. The constant exposure to pathogens from unsanitary conditions means that your body is in a perpetual state of low-level battle against illness. Your immune system is constantly engaged, and a minor infection can easily escalate if your body is already weakened by parasites, poor nutrition, or another ongoing illness. Childhood is particularly perilous, as young immune systems are bombarded from birth. This is why infant and child mortality rates are shockingly high, a brutal reality that you simply accept as part of life. You expect to lose children, and you mourn, but you move on because death is always nearby. The concept of quarantine, or isolating the sick, is practiced, but often crudely and inconsistently. If someone in your family falls ill with something visibly horrifying, like a severe skin disease or a mysterious fever, you might try to keep them separated, but in a small home, true isolation is impossible. Furthermore, without understanding airborne transmission or asymptomatic carriers, the efforts are often too little, too late. You might also try to avoid visibly sick people in public, giving them a wide berth. But the invisible threats are everywhere. Even the beautiful city itself, with its grand architecture, holds hidden dangers. Construction sites, like the Parthenon, are places where accidents can lead to injury, and injury without proper antiseptic care can lead to fatal infection. Remember that simple cut or scrape in a world teeming with unmanaged waste and no antibiotics. It quickly turns into a life-threatening scenario. The marble dust in the air, the dust from the unpaved roads, all contribute to respiratory irritation, making you more susceptible to lung ailments. The horrifying diseases of ancient Greece are not just abstract concepts. They are the pervasive, ever-present reality of daily life, silently shaped by the brutal lack of sanitation and the inevitable consequences of urban living without modern medical understanding. You live with a constant, low hum of illness. The knowledge that any moment, a sudden fever or a persistent cough could be the beginning of the end. It's a testament to human resilience that any grand achievements were made at all, when simply surviving from one day to the next was such a perilous undertaking. You've gained a grim understanding of how sanitation and crowded conditions foster disease. Now, a truly terrifying reality unfolds: the arrival of the Plague of Athens, a catastrophic epidemic that will rewrite the rules of your world, turning a thriving city into a charnel house. It begins subtly. In the spring of 430 BCE, during the early years of the Peloponnesian War, Athens is a besieged city. You, like every other citizen, are confined within the formidable long walls that connect Athens to its port, Piraeus. This offers protection from the Spartan army ravaging your farmlands, but it also creates a deadly trap. Thousands of refugees from the surrounding countryside have poured into the city, seeking safety within the walls. Every spare space, every public building, even temples, are crammed with people and their livestock. The city's population swells, turning an already bustling polis into an unprecedented cauldron of human density. Then, the whispers start. Sailors and merchants arriving at Piraeus bring not just goods, but a terrifying new illness. It's said to have originated in Ethiopia, spreading through Egypt and Libya, then eastward to the Persian Empire, before finally making its horrifying journey across the sea. The first cases in Athens are in Piraeus, near the docks, then quickly spread to the upper city. You hear about it at the Agora in hushed, frightened tones. At first, it's dismissed as another common fever, but quickly, its unique and horrifying symptoms make it clear this is something far, far worse. The onset is sudden and violent. It begins with intense headaches, a burning sensation in your eyes, and a redness and inflammation that makes them ache. Your throat becomes raw, your tongue unnaturally red, and emitting a foul breath. A sneeze, a cough. These are not just minor discomforts, but the first terrifying harbingers of death. Within a few days, the symptoms escalate. You develop hoarseness and a severe cough that racks your body. The pain in your chest becomes unbearable. Then a new, more horrifying set of symptoms appears. Your skin breaks out in rashes and sores, sometimes with pustules or ulcers. Inside, the disease ravages your gut. You suffer from intense internal heat, so burning that you can barely tolerate clothing, craving only cool water, yet even drinking it offers little relief. Then come the retching and vomiting, so severe that some people rupture their stomachs or die from the sheer exhaustion of it. The thirst is insatiable, driving victims to throw themselves into public wells or cisterns, desperately seeking relief, inadvertently spreading the contagion further. The disease quickly progresses to a terrifying fever, often accompanied by restlessness and insomnia. The agony is so profound that some, driven mad by the pain, lose their memory entirely, forgetting even their own names. You witness people stumbling through the streets, delirious, their bodies covered in sores, their minds gone. This is not a slow, wasting sickness like tuberculosis. This is a rapid, brutal assault on every system of the body. Most victims die within 7 to 9 days of the first symptoms appearing, though some, even more horrifyingly, survive the initial torment only to succumb later to debilitating secondary infections, gangrene, or a complete loss of memory and identity. The scale of death quickly overwhelms all systems. The normal rituals of burial, so central to Greek piety and respect for the dead, are abandoned. The dead are simply too numerous. Bodies pile up in homes, in the streets, at the city gates. The stench of decay becomes pervasive, mingling with the burning smell of funeral pyres, hastily constructed to dispose of the corpses. People resort to burning bodies in mass graves, or even pushing them into existing burial pits, often without proper ceremony, violating long-held customs. You see the sheer terror in the eyes of the gravediggers, often slaves or prisoners, forced into this gruesome work. The medical establishment, as rudimentary as it was, is utterly helpless. The esteemed Hippocratic physicians, with their theories of humors, find their knowledge useless against this unknown, virulent enemy. Their carefully observed symptoms lead to no effective treatments. They try bleeding, purging, herbal remedies, all to no avail. Many physicians, driven by duty or misguided belief in their own efficacy, continue to tend to the sick and quickly succumb themselves. This loss of trained healers further exacerbates the crisis, leaving the populace even more vulnerable. The chilling reality is that those who treated the sick were the most likely to die. A truly terrifying occupational hazard. The fear of contagion leads to the breakdown of all social norms. People avoid contact with the sick, even their own family members. The sick are often left to die alone, abandoned by their frightened relatives. The sense of collective responsibility, so vital to Athenian democracy, dissolves under the overwhelming terror. You witness acts of extreme selfishness, people hoarding resources, fleeing from dying loved ones, alongside acts of incredible, almost foolhardy bravery, as some individuals, driven by compassion, stay to tend to the afflicted, knowing full well it means their own, almost certain death. Historians still debate the specific pathogen that caused the plague of Athens, with theories ranging from typhus and smallpox to a form of hemorrhagic fever, or even a specialized strain of the bubonic plague, making its true identity a persistent historical mystery. The sheer mortality rate is staggering. Thucydides, the great historian and survivor of the plague, chillingly recounts that the sick died like sheep, and that no one knew what to do. Estimates suggest that between 75,000 and 100,000 people, perhaps a quarter to a third of Athens' population at the time, perished in the initial outbreak alone, with subsequent waves adding to the grim tally. The city, once a vibrant polis, becomes a graveyard. The long walls, built for protection, become walls of a vast open-air tomb. The psychological impact is immense. The constant exposure to death, the loss of loved ones, the breakdown of society, all combine to create a profound sense of despair and nihilism. Some, believing they would die anyway, abandon all moral restraint, indulging in excessive drinking, feasting, and promiscuity. Why uphold laws or morality when death is indiscriminate and inevitable? Others succumb to overwhelming grief and madness. The very foundations of Athenian rationalism and civic virtue are tested, and in many cases found wanting under the brutal pressure of the epidemic. Your world, once so ordered and full of promise, has been turned upside down by an invisible, horrifying enemy. The sounds of daily life are replaced by the silence of absence, or the mournful wails of the bereaved. The vibrant city you once knew is a shadow of its former self, its streets echoing with the ghosts of the fallen. The Plague of Athens is not just a historical event. It is a terrifying, visceral experience of utter helplessness and the brutal reality of disease in an ancient world. You pray, you hope, you try to survive. But the horrifying presence of death is everywhere. You've just witnessed the horrific onslaught of the Plague of Athens, a terrifying reminder of how vulnerable your seemingly sophisticated society truly is. Now, as the plague rages, you observe the complete breakdown of the political, social, and moral order that once defined your Athenian world. The very fabric of your polis frays under the relentless pressure of mass death. Athens, a city-state renowned for its democratic institutions and respect for law, descends into chaos. The assembly, the beating heart of Athenian democracy where citizens debated and voted on laws, can no longer function. With so many citizens dead or incapacitated, and the terrifying fear of contagion hanging over every gathering, public life grinds to a halt. The Boule, the Council of 500 and the various courts and magistrates are decimated by the plague. There are simply not enough healthy people left to administer justice, to collect taxes, or to maintain civil order. The rule of law, Once the pride of Athens crumbles, you see crimes being committed openly, with no one to stop them. Property is looted, houses are broken into, and the desperate steal from the dead or dying. The traditional deterrence fines, imprisonment, public shaming mean nothing when death is the ultimate, indiscriminate punisher. The very concept of piety and religious observance is challenged. Temples, once vibrant centers of worship, stand empty or are repurposed as makeshift hospitals or morgues. Priests and priestesses, revered figures, die alongside common citizens, shaking the faith of the survivors. Why would the gods allow such suffering? Why do prayers and sacrifices offer no protection? Thucydides, the historian, noted the profound despair that led some to abandon all reverence for the divine, believing it made no difference. You witness people throwing bodies into sacred wells or burying them in hallowed ground without proper rites, acts that would have been unthinkable sacrilege just weeks before. The fear of divine punishment is overshadowed by the immediate, overwhelming fear of the plague itself. Social bonds, once incredibly strong in Athenian society, dissolve under the pressure. The deep-seated Greek value of philanthropy, love for humanity, expressed through acts of kindness and generosity, evaporates. People abandon their sick loved ones, even their closest family members, terrified of contagion. Parents leave their dying children, and children abandon their ailing parents. The sick are left to suffer and die alone, their pleas for water or comfort going unheard. This terrifying breakdown of familial and communal solidarity is perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the plague's impact. You see it in the haunted eyes of those who have had to make such agonizing choices, or those who were abandoned themselves. The ethical framework of your society collapses. Why be virtuous? Why strive for justice? Why uphold honesty? When death is random and inescapable, Thucydides chillingly observed that people became reckless, indulging in pleasures and vices, believing they would die anyway. So why not seize the moment you might see uncharacteristic revelry amidst the dying, or groups of desperate individuals engaging in drinking and debauchery? A grim dance with death. The fear of punishment, either human or divine, diminishes, leading to widespread lawlessness and moral decay. This isn't the noble, philosophizing Athens. This is a city stripped bare, revealing the primal, desperate instincts of humanity. The dense, overcrowded conditions within the long walls, initially a strategic necessity, become a death trap. The influx of rural refugees, crammed into every available space, meant the disease spread with unparalleled speed and ferocity. Imagine the stench: thousands of unwashed bodies, human and animal waste, the sick vomiting and defecating where they lay, and the pervasive odor of decaying corpses. This horrific environment, combined with the lack of understanding of hygiene and contagion, turned Athens into a giant incubator for the plague. The air itself feels thick with sickness, a constant reminder of the unseen enemy. The military, the very force protecting Athens from Sparta, is severely weakened. Soldiers, confined within the city walls like everyone else, fall ill and die in vast numbers. The Athenian navy, crucial to its power, also suffers immense losses among its crews. This internal devastation severely cripples Athens' ability to fight the ongoing Peloponnesian War. The plague does what the Spartan army could not: it brings Athens to its knees, not through military might, but through biological warfare waged by an unseen enemy. Historians still debate the extent to which the plague of Athens ultimately decided the Peloponnesian War, but its weakening effect on Athenian power is undeniable. The psychological toll on the survivors is immense and lasting. You are surrounded by constant reminders of death, by empty homes, by the ghosts of friends and family. The world you knew, with its certainties and its beauty, has been shattered. Many suffer from deep grief, survivor's guilt, or what you might call a form of ancient PTSD. Some become utterly cynical, stripped of all hope and belief in humanity's goodness. Others cling to life with a fierce desperation, but their joy is always shadowed by the memory of loss. The experience carves deep marks into the collective psyche of Athens, leaving a legacy of trauma that will echo for generations. The brutal reality of the plague of Athens is not just a medical catastrophe, it is a profound societal collapse, a terrifying experiment in human endurance. You live through a period where the very foundations of your civilization, its laws, its morality, its social bonds, and its faith, are tested to their breaking point. It's a chilling reminder that even the most advanced and enlightened societies are only as strong as their most vulnerable members, and that an invisible enemy can lay waste to everything humanity holds dear. Your world has been irrevocably altered, and you are left to pick up the pieces of a shattered polis. You've witnessed the breakdown of Athenian society and the horrifying scale of the plague. Now, with death so omnipresent, you observe how the greatest minds of your era, the philosophers and early physicians, grapple with a disaster that defies their understanding, leaving an indelible mark on their thinking and your world. In a city that prides itself on reason and logical inquiry, the plague presents an intellectual crisis. You hear the sophists, who teach rhetoric and wisdom, struggling to find words adequate to describe the horror. Their elaborate arguments and logical deductions, so powerful in the agora, seem utterly impotent in the face of this invisible killer. Their debates about justice and virtue feel hollow when morality itself has collapsed. The plague forces thinkers to confront the limits of human knowledge and the terrifying unpredictability of existence. It's a humbling, brutal lesson for a society that often believed in its intellectual superiority. One of the most significant figures you observe is Thucydides, the great Athenian historian. He is not just chronicling the Peloponnesian War, he is living through the plague, observing it with a chillingly detached, almost scientific eye. He himself falls ill but recovers, giving him a unique, terrifying perspective. You might see him, a somber figure, meticulously noting the symptoms, the patterns of transmission, and the behavioral changes in the population. He records that no known remedies offered relief, and that physicians, ignorant of the nature of the disease, were the first to die, since they had the most contact with the sick. His method is empirical, focusing on observable facts rather than divine explanations. A remarkable approach for his time. He's trying to understand the how of the plague, not just the why. Thucydides' account is extraordinary because it deliberately avoids supernatural explanations. He doesn't blame the gods, he blames a natural phenomenon. He emphasizes the unprecedented nature of the disease, its rapid spread, and its brutal effect on both body and mind. His detailed description of symptoms, the burning fever, the internal heat, the rashes, the severe vomiting, the agonizing thirst, and the loss of memory, provides a horrifying first-hand clinical picture. He even notes the immunity of those who recovered, a crucial observation that, centuries later, would become fundamental to understanding immunity and vaccines. You hear his observations, perhaps retold in hushed tones, and they resonate with your own terrifying experiences. Then there are the Hippocratic physicians, those who follow the teachings of Hippocrates of Cos. They represent the forefront of rational medicine in your time. Unlike the priests who attribute illness to divine wrath, Hippocratics seek natural explanations. They meticulously observe symptoms, examine patients, and record their findings. Their emphasis is on prognosis, predicting the course of a disease, and on supporting the body's natural healing processes through diet, rest, and simple remedies. They avoid invasive procedures unless absolutely necessary. You might consult one for a persistent cough, and he would inquire about your diet, your sleep, your daily routine, trying to find an imbalance in your humors. However, even these rational physicians are utterly bewildered by the plague of Athens. Their theories of humoral imbalance cannot explain its sudden onset, its rapid progression, or its terrifying lethality. They lack understanding of contagion in the modern sense. While they might intuitively isolate the sick, they don't grasp the microscopic nature of the disease or its vectors. You witness them trying their standard remedies, bleeding, purging, applying poultices, all of which prove useless against this new, virulent enemy. Many, like the common citizens, fall victim themselves, their rational approach unable to save them. The brutal reality of the plague tests their entire medical philosophy to its breaking point. Philosophers like Socrates, who lived through this period, also faced immense intellectual challenges. While Socrates himself was more focused on ethics and self-knowledge than natural philosophy or medicine, the societal collapse around him undoubtedly shaped his understanding of human nature and civic virtue. He continued his philosophical discussions even amidst the chaos, perhaps debating how one should live when death is so imminent and unpredictable. His emphasis on introspection and moral conduct might have gained new urgency in a world where external order had disintegrated. Historians still debate the specific philosophical impact of the plague on Socrates' thought, but it undeniably provided a stark backdrop to his ethical inquiries. The plague also fuels existing debates and creates new ones within the intellectual circles. Is the city cursed? Is it punishment for hubris? Or is it a purely natural phenomenon, beyond the gods' direct intervention? As some more materialist philosophers might argue, these questions are not just academic, they are desperate attempts to grasp meaning from overwhelming suffering. You hear these debates, perhaps in hushed tones, as people try to find solace or an explanation, anything to make sense of the senseless. The immediate medical response during the plague is often a mix of desperation and tradition. Herbal concoctions, often with little efficacy, are tried. Prayers and rituals become more fervent. People might turn to more mystical healers or charlatans who promise miraculous cures, exploiting the fear and despair. The lack of effective treatment means that survival often comes down to luck, a strong constitution, or perhaps, for a fortunate few, a natural immunity developed after exposure to similar, less lethal pathogens earlier in life. The horrifying truth for these ancient thinkers and healers is that their most advanced knowledge and their most profound philosophical insights offer no protection, no cure, no explanation for the plague. It stands as a terrifying testament to the limits of human understanding in the face of an unknown biological force. Yet, it is precisely this brutal experience that, in the long run, helps to refine the empirical approach to disease, laying the very early, almost imperceptible groundwork for future medical science. The plague, in its horrifying wake, forces a reevaluation of what can be known, what can be controlled, and what must simply be endured. You live through a time when even the smartest among you are utterly bewildered, a truly humbling and terrifying reality. You've witnessed the desperate struggle of Athens' greatest minds against the unyielding plague. Now, as the immediate crisis of the epidemic begins to wane, you realize that for many, life is still a constant battle against enduring ailments and silent, chronic diseases that silently shape daily existence and mortality for centuries. Even before the Great Plague, your life in ancient Greece was often marked by a background hum of illness. Now, in the aftermath, with weakened populations and continued poor sanitation, these everyday threats feel even more insidious. One of the most common and persistent adversaries is malaria. You might experience its symptoms yourself, recurring bouts of fever and chills, often accompanied by headaches, muscle aches, and a profound sense of exhaustion. These attacks are cyclical, appearing every few days, debilitating you, making work impossible during a fever, and leaving you weak and anemic in between. It's not usually a swift killer for adults, but it's a chronic drain on your energy and health, making you more susceptible to other, more acute illnesses. You understand now that living near marshy areas or stagnant water increases your risk, even if you don't grasp the mosquito's role. It's just the a persistent, miserable fact of life. Then there are the gastrointestinal diseases. Remember the constant threat of dysentery and typhoid. Even after the plague, these remain endemic. Contaminated water, improperly stored food, and the omnipresence of human waste ensure that digestive upsets, diarrhea, and more severe infections are a recurring part of life. You've learned to be cautious about what you eat and drink, but without modern understanding of hygiene, it's a losing battle. You likely suffer from chronic gut issues, perhaps never feeling truly well, constantly battling some form of internal distress. Children, especially, to remain highly vulnerable to these infections, contributing to the persistent high rates of infant and child mortality long after the major plague has passed. Tuberculosis, that insidious wasting disease, continues its slow, relentless march. In the post-plague world, with populations perhaps slightly less dense but still living in close quarters and with weakened immune systems from previous illness or malnutrition, it remains a significant killer. You might see individuals, particularly younger adults, develop a persistent cough, grow thin and pale, and slowly decline over months or years. There's no cure, only palliation through rest and good nutrition, often beyond the means of ordinary citizens. The despair of watching someone slowly waste away, knowing there's nothing to be done, is a profound and common grief. It's a quiet killer, without the dramatic suddenness of the plague, but equally merciless in its slow, grinding impact. Beyond these major illnesses, a myriad of other chronic conditions affect daily life. Arthritis and other musculoskeletal pains are common, especially for those who perform heavy manual labor from a young age. Imagine the constant aches in your joints, the stiffness in your back, as you toil in the fields or construct buildings. There are no anti-inflammatory drugs beyond crude herbal remedies, so you simply learn to live with the pain, pushing through it day after day. You might see older individuals hobbled by severe arthritis, their movements slow and painful, a grim forecast of your own potential future. Skin conditions, as you experienced before, remain a persistent nuisance and source of discomfort. Scabies, ringworm, and impetigo, a bacterial skin infection, are common, exacerbated by communal living and limited access to thorough washing with soap. These are not typically fatal, but they cause chronic itching, discomfort, and can lead to secondary infections from incessant scratching. Imagine trying to get a good night's sleep when your skin constantly itches, or working diligently when you're preoccupied by persistent skin lesions. It's a low-level but constant form of misery. Dental health is almost universally poor. Without modern dentistry, tooth decay, gum disease, and abscesses are common. A toothache can be excruciating, incapacitating you for days. You might try crude remedies, hot compresses, herbal pastes, but often, the only solution is extraction, usually performed by a barber surgeon with rudimentary tools and no pain relief. Many adults will lose most of their teeth by middle age, making eating difficult and contributing to overall poor nutrition. You've probably seen people with swollen jaws, faces distorted by painful abscesses, a grim testament to the lack of proper dental care. Eye conditions are also widespread. Conjunctivitis, pink eye from dust and irritants, is common. More seriously, trachoma, a bacterial infection spread by flies and direct contact, is endemic in some regions, leading to chronic inflammation and, eventually, blindness. The pervasive dust from unpaved roads and the smoke from indoor fires also contribute to eye irritation and damage over time. You might see many older individuals with clouded eyes, their vision severely impaired, navigating a world that demands acute sight for survival. The average lifespan is brutally short compared to your modern era. While some individuals, if they are particularly robust and lucky, might live into their 60s or 70s, the vast majority succumb much earlier to infections, childbirth complications, accidents, or the cumulative effects of chronic diseases. Childbirth itself remains incredibly dangerous for women, with high rates of maternal mortality from infection, hemorrhage, or exhaustion. Even minor infections during or after delivery can be fatal without antibiotics. The cycle of life and death is much more rapid, and the loss of life, particularly young life, is a constant, brutal reality. Historians still debate the specific causes of death in individual cases due to limited diagnostic information in ancient texts. However, the descriptions of chronic symptoms and common ailments point to a wide range of debilitating and often fatal diseases beyond the major epidemics. You live in a world where disease is not an exception, but a constant, silent presence, shaping every aspect of your daily life, from your physical capabilities to your mental resilience. The terrifying diseases of ancient Greece are a constant reminder of humanity's enduring vulnerability, even in an age of supposed enlightenment. You just keep going, hoping you avoid the worst, adapting to a life where good health is a luxury and survival is a daily triumph. You've absorbed the grim realities of chronic illness in ancient Greece, the pervasive background hum of ailments that chipped away at life. Now, turn your mind to the ultimate, universal medical reality of your era, death itself. You witness the methods, the rituals, and the raw, unvarnished attitudes towards the end of life in a society where it is an ever-present companion. In ancient Greece, death is not hidden away in hospitals or shrouded in modern medical euphemisms. It happens in the home, surrounded by family, or in the street, exposed to the elements. You see it constantly. A neighbor collapses from a sudden fever. A child succumbs to dysentery. An elder simply fades away. There are no intensive care units, no complex life support machines. Once a body begins its final decline, the process is swift and irreversible. You become accustomed to the sight of illness and the smell of decay, a chillingly common part of your daily sensory experience. When death occurs, the immediate practicalities take precedence. The body must be prepared. This usually involves washing the deceased, anointing them with olive oil, and sometimes dressing them in white garments. Coins, often in a ball, are placed in or on the mouth of the deceased. This is not for a vending machine in the afterlife, but for Karen, the ferryman of the underworld, to pay for passage across the river Styx. It's a small, poignant ritual, a final act of care to ensure the soul's journey. You might participate in this, carefully placing the small coin, knowing it is the last gesture you can offer. The prothesis, or wake, follows. The deceased is laid out on a bier in the home, feet facing the door for public viewing. This allows family, friends, and neighbors to pay their respects and mourn. Women, particularly female relatives, lead the lamentation, often with ritualized wailing, tearing of hair, and beating of their breasts. This open, public display of grief is expected and encouraged. The atmosphere is thick with sorrow, punctuated by the rhythmic cries of the mourners. You attend these wakes often, a constant reminder of how many have been lost, how fragile life truly is. It's a raw, emotional outpouring, unlike the more subdued mourning traditions of some modern cultures. After the prothesis comes the ekphora, the funeral procession, usually held before dawn to avoid the heat of the day and to minimize disruption. The body is carried on the bier through the streets to the burial ground. Family members, both male and female, follow the bier, sometimes accompanied by hired mourners who amplify the lamentation. While some wealthier families might have elaborate processions, for most, it's a simple, somber affair. You might join the procession of a neighbor, walking quietly alongside, bearing witness to their final journey. The silence of the dawn, broken only by the mournful cries, creates a chilling atmosphere. Burial is the most common method of disposing of the dead, though cremation is also practiced, especially for warriors or during times of plague, when mass disposal is necessary. For a typical burial, the body is placed in a sarcophagus or a simple wooden coffin and interred in a family plot outside the city walls. Graves are often marked with stelae, carved stone slabs, sometimes depicting the deceased or scenes from their life. These grave markers are not just memorials, they are often beautiful works of art, providing a lasting tribute to the departed. You might visit these burial grounds, walking among the stone markers, reflecting on the lives that have passed. The ancient Greeks held complex beliefs about the afterlife. The common belief was that the soul journeyed to Hades, a shadowy underworld ruled by the god Hades. It was not necessarily a place of punishment that was Tartarus, reserved for the truly wicked, but rather a dim, joyless existence. Heroes, however, might achieve a more glorious afterlife in the Elysian fields. These beliefs influenced funeral rites, with emphasis on proper burial to ensure the soul's peaceful passage. The concept of a final judgment, where one's deeds in life were weighed, was also present, instilling a moral imperative in daily living. While doctors dealt with the living, the dead were the domain of specific rituals and societal norms. There was no concept of a modern coroner or medical examiner. The cause of death, unless obvious from external injuries, was largely a matter of speculation or religious interpretation. If someone died of a mysterious illness, it was often attributed to divine displeasure or miasma rather than a specific disease process. This lack of medical understanding about the cause of death further compounded the fear and mystery surrounding widespread illness. One particularly poignant aspect is the concept of memorials and remembrance. Even for the common person, there was a desire to be remembered, to have one's name and image preserved. This is evident in the prevalence of grave markers, even simple ones. Festivals for the dead, such as the Anthesteria, also allowed for communal mourning and remembrance, ensuring that the deceased were not forgotten. This need to honor the dead reflects a deep-seated human desire for continuity and the enduring power of memory. Even in the face of overwhelming loss, historians still debate the extent to which the specific rituals of death changed or were abandoned during widespread epidemics like the Plague of Athens, as practical necessities often overrode traditional piety. However, the core beliefs about the soul's journey and the need for proper burial remained strong, even if rushed or simplified. You live in a society that is intimately familiar with death, that integrates it into its daily life and its spiritual understanding. It's a world where the fragility of existence is a constant, brutal lesson, making every sunrise a small victory, and every sunset a quiet meditation on the inevitable. You've absorbed the grim realities of death and its rituals in ancient Greece. Now, as your society grapples with constant illness, you begin to see the surprising ways in which these horrifying experiences inadvertently lay the very early groundwork for future medical understanding. A slow, almost imperceptible shift from pure superstition to nascent scientific inquiry. The most profound, if unintended, legacy of widespread disease like the plague of Athens is the sheer volume of observation. While ancient physicians didn't understand germs, they were meticulous observers of symptoms, patterns, and outcomes. Thucydides, as you saw, documented the plague with a precision that foreshadows modern epidemiology. This consistent recording of what happened during epidemics, even without understanding the why, created a massive, albeit disorganized, dataset of medical phenomena. Every fever, every rash, every bubo, every death contributed to a growing body of empirical evidence, hinting at patterns that future generations might decipher. It's like gathering countless puzzle pieces without yet knowing what the final picture will be. The concept of immunity, though not understood in its biological sense, was an undeniable observation. Thucydides explicitly noted that those who recovered from the plague of Athens were immune to subsequent attacks. You've seen this yourself. The rare few who survived a severe fever seem to walk among the newly sick without fear, tending to them because they know they cannot be reinfected. This practical, observed immunity, without knowing how it worked, became a powerful, almost mystical truth. It's a fact that future medical thinkers would eventually unravel, leading to vaccines and modern immunology. Remember how you avoided the sick now. You see the ones who can't get sick again become crucial caregivers. The emphasis of Hippocratic medicine on rational inquiry and natural causes for disease, rather than solely divine intervention, was a monumental step. Even if their humoral theories were flawed, their insistence on observation, prognosis, and the body's own healing capabilities paved the way for a more scientific approach to medicine. They rejected the idea that every illness was a direct punishment from an angry god, urging a search for earthly explanations. This subtle but profound philosophical shift was crucial. It meant that instead of simply praying, someone might actually look at what you ate, where you lived, or who you associated with, attempting to find a cause and effect. It's the very beginning of clinical reasoning. The sheer scale of death also forced a reevaluation of public health measures, however rudimentary. While sewage systems were primitive, the experience of devastating epidemics would eventually, centuries later, drive innovations in urban planning and sanitation. The connection between crowded, unsanitary conditions and disease outbreaks, while not fully understood in terms of germ theory, was strongly felt and instinctively addressed in some ways. For instance, the practice of isolating the sick or quarantining ships arriving from plague-ridden areas, which emerged later in medieval times, directly stemmed from these horrifying ancient experiences. Though you don't have these formalized systems yet, the raw, brutal lesson is being learned. Keeping disease away might just help. The suffering itself also fueled a relentless, if desperate, search for new remedies and treatments. While many were ineffective, the constant experimentation with herbs, minerals, and surgical techniques, even if crude, slowly built up a body of practical knowledge about what might soothe symptoms, what might be poisonous, and what might offer even a sliver of relief. This trial-and-error approach, though painful for those undergoing it, contributed to the slow accumulation of medical wisdom, passed down through generations of healers. The very act of challenging divine explanations for disease, as exemplified by Thucydides, contributed to a broader intellectual climate that would eventually foster scientific thought. When the gods offered no answers, humanity was forced to look inward, to observe the natural world more closely, and to seek answers through human reason. This subtle but profound shift in worldview, away from fatalism and towards a belief in human agency and understanding, is a crucial long-term legacy of experiencing such devastating, inexplicable events. It sparked a quiet thirst for genuine knowledge, pushing beyond myths and legends. Finally, the sheer resilience of the human body and the variability of individual responses to disease became apparent. Why did some die quickly, while others lingered, and a few even recovered. This constant observation of differing outcomes, even for those with similar symptoms, laid the groundwork for understanding individual constitution, genetic predispositions though unknown, and the complex interplay between a host and a pathogen. It posed questions that future medical science would endlessly strive to answer. The horrifying diseases of ancient Greece, and especially the Great Plague of Athens, were not just periods of immense suffering. They were also unwitting catalysts for intellectual and practical developments that, over centuries, would slowly but surely lead to a more profound understanding of medicine, public health, and the very nature of disease. You are living through a period of brutal lessons, lessons that will echo through time, shaping the future of medicine in ways you can barely imagine. You've absorbed the grim realities of death and its rituals in ancient Greece, and even glimpsed how these horrifying experiences unexpectedly laid the groundwork for future medical understanding. Now, as your journey through the diseases of ancient Greece concludes, you're left to reflect on how these ancient struggles, though separated by millennia, still offer profound lessons for your modern world. Consider the concept of public health. While the ancient Greeks lacked germ theory, the devastating impact of the plague of Athens and the constant presence of diseases like dysentery and malaria forced them to make connections. However rudimentary, they observed that overcrowded areas and stagnant water seemed to bring more sickness. This direct, brutal experience of cause and effect, even if not fully understood, planted the very first seeds of urban planning focused on health and the intuitive idea of avoiding contaminated water. You see modern cities with complex sewer systems, clean water supplies, and regulations on waste disposal. These are not accidental inventions. They are the cumulative result of countless generations learning, often through immense suffering, that a healthy environment is fundamental to a healthy population. The ancient struggles for basic sanitation, though crude, are the distant ancestors of your modern infrastructure. Then there's the enduring lesson of human resilience. You've seen how individuals and communities faced terrifying, inexplicable diseases with no hope of cure. They suffered, they mourned, but they also adapted. They developed ingenious, if sometimes ineffective, remedies. They found ways to cope with chronic pain and debilitating illness. They buried their dead and found the strength to carry on, to rebuild their lives and their cities. This isn't just a historical anecdote. It's a testament to the indomitable human spirit. You, living in your modern world, benefit from this inherited resilience, the deep-seated capacity to overcome adversity that has been forged through millennia of such brutal challenges. The ancient world's struggle also highlights the critical importance of scientific inquiry. The Hippocratic physicians, for all their limitations, began to move away from purely supernatural explanations for disease, emphasizing observation and rational thought. Thucydides, in his meticulous account of the plague, demonstrated a remarkably objective, almost scientific, approach to understanding a medical catastrophe. This nascent spirit of inquiry, born from a desperate need to understand and control disease, is the distant flicker that eventually led to modern medicine. Without those early, brave attempts to observe and rationalize, your world of antibiotics, vaccines, and advanced diagnostics might never have materialized. It teaches you that even in the darkest times, the pursuit of knowledge offers the greatest hope. Think about the psychological impact of pandemics. The plague of Athens, like the Black Death centuries later, didn't just kill bodies, it shattered minds and societies. It led to despair, moral decay, and a questioning of fundamental beliefs. You see echoes of this in your modern world during widespread health crises. The fear, the social isolation, the economic disruption, and the deep psychological scars left on survivors. Understanding these ancient responses helps you contextualize and perhaps even empathize with the enduring human experience of widespread illness, connecting you to the fears and hopes of people long past. Finally, the horrifying diseases of ancient Greece serve as a humbling reminder of human vulnerability. For all your technological advancements, for all your medical breakthroughs, humanity remains susceptible to new pathogens, to environmental changes, and to the unpredictable forces of nature. The ancient Greeks, despite their intellectual and cultural achievements, were at the mercy of invisible killers. Their story is a timeless cautionary tale: never take health for granted. and never cease to strive for greater understanding and preparedness in the face of what remains largely a biological mystery. You stand on the shoulders of those who suffered, benefiting from the hard-won lessons etched into the very fabric of history,